Hey folks, today I'm taking a look at the most premium 60% mechanical keyboard I've ever reviewed, and that is a fully loaded drop Carina. If you're on this channel for desk setup videos, well, I invite you to keep watching for this one as it does complement pretty well a clean setup. But back to the keyboard, what makes this one unique is the USB-C port pair at the back that lets you connect an additional USB-C device to your computer easily. I think that's an awesome feature, but let's see if this exact build with drop Holy Pandas and a copper plate is worth its $290 price. So this keyboard is entirely composed from parts that Drop make, and they come in 4 separate boxes. The main box has the PCB, the case, USB-C cable, stabilizers, and hardware to assemble it. The plate then comes in its dedicated box, and we also have Drop Holy Panda switches. This is a set of 70, so we'll have a few leftovers after the build. The ones I received are not factory lubed, and they're 3-pin only as expected. Finally, I went with the white Skylight keycaps, again from Drop. I thought these would be the best match given that the Carina has both top and bottom RGB LEDs and the case is semi-transparent. So now to the build, I started by screwing the PCB in the case with the provided standoff screws. So not only these lock the PCB in place, but they also had threading holes for the top plate. After that, I clipped and lubed the included stabilizers with Krytox 205. These seem pretty standard overall. They're nothing special like screw in or something like that, but I figured I'd better use these instead of some third-party stabs for a better representation of what you're getting. I then installed the stabs on the copper plate and I was able to screw the plate in the case. I have to say it's a very solid build, and both the standoff screws and the fact that the plate is copper make it so that this keyboard won't bend. I took the time to lube the switches with Krytox 205. It took me a little over 2 hours in total, and I made sure to record a sound test before and after lubing the switches, something that you'll hear later on. I then added all the switches in. Here it's worth noting that the PCB supports 5-pin switches, as I believe both the Alt and Control keyboards from Drop have PCBs with 3-pin support only. A really good change they made here to make sure this board works with most enthusiast switches, and even though the Holy Pandas are 3-pin only, the copper plate is thick and incredibly solid, so the switches lock into place even without the extra pins. I also love how the Holy Pandas match the copper plate. The stem is very close to its color and it's such a weird theme that's usually hard to match with anything, while here I think we're onto something. I finally added the keycaps. The Carina has a fully standard NC layout, and this Skylight keycap set from Drop covers a full NC layout, so we'll have a few leftovers but no missing keys. Looking a bit closer at it, I'm very impressed with the build quality. The case has a nice thickness and looks great and features a clean and simple design. I didn't notice any defect or imperfections. The angle is fixed as it doesn't have flip out feet or magnetic ones like the Control or Alt variants, but the angle here feels similar to most other 60% keyboards and is comfortable. At the back, you get 2 USB-C ports, so you can connect the keyboard on one end or the other, and the remaining port can be used to connect another USB-C device, which I think is really cool. Although I'm not sure if you can realistically use it for data transfer, as I tried connecting an SSD to it and got super slow speeds, like around 1 megabyte per second instead of 400 to 500. I guess you could use it for a mouse or more for power, like to charge a phone. These low speeds were a surprise to me, as the cable the keyboard comes with seems to be USB 3.0, so that's a bit disappointing. And finally, the case diffuses light really nicely. I believe the thickness helps and the effect looks pretty good. Even with a colored plate and opaque switches like the Drop Holy Pandas, the lights look very nice and colors are vibrant. Speaking of that plate, I've had brass plates in the past and thought they were great, but copper is also a great choice, and here the quality of the finish and the thickness is really good in my view. Now to the keycaps, I feel like you can't really go wrong with these Drop Skylight keycaps. For $45, you get a full set of PBT keycaps with double shot legends, and here I think the font looks nice, letters are straight, and the size of the font looks good across the set. They feature an OEM profile, so they're nothing too special, and here in this white color, it's not unique or anything, but still, I think these look super clean with this build, given that the case is white-ish as well. So now to these Drop Holy Panda switches. These are probably some of the most well-known high-end tactile switches out there, so I was looking forward to testing these. I have to say, out of the box, they're not the most impressive. Mines came unlubed, but it seems like it's not always the case, as we can see people getting factory lube switches even recently. The issue with these is that the process is uneven, so you kind of have to clean it off and start over. Definitely not ideal. From my tests with other stock switches, they're louder and scratchier than Glorious Pandas, Everglide Oreos, and Duroc T1s, while they might be better or on par compared to Novel Key Blueberries. Don't get me wrong, it's not a bad switch at all, but it will benefit from lubing. Their tactile bump is most similar to the Glorious Pandas, I would say, although they stop a bit more abruptly at the actuation point, so they would be better if you don't want to bottom out. In comparison, the tactile bump on the Oreos and T1s is quite intense, and it almost feels like the switch gets stuck when actuating. But personally, I would probably just not buy these switches at all. If I were to shell out $85, I would either pay a bit more for Aqua Xylens V2s, which I love, or save a bit with one of the other options I compared them to earlier. As for the stabilizers, when lubed, they do feel and sound okay for the most part, but that spacebar was still rattling. These definitely need to be lubed, otherwise they sound pretty bad, but I believe that's a known fact for drop stabilizers. So one of the main features with this Carina keyboard is that it's QMK compatible. It's unfortunately not VIA compatible as of the time of filming, so it's not as easy of a process to update the firmware with a simple UI, but at least it's doable. Out of the box, I'm not too sure if arrow keys were on one of the layers at all, so I did remap the base and second layers to my likings using Drop's configurator for the Carina, and then flash the keyboard with it following the instructions. The PCB can have up to 15 layers in total from what it seems in the configurator, and you can map a variety of keys here, including RGB LED controls, so it's quite complete in terms of key remapping. Speaking of LEDs, with QMK, you can actually configure the LEDs in depth. Both the top and bottom LEDs can be set individually on a per layer basis, so if you hold down a temporary layer switch key, the whole board can change its current light setup. Again, you can really set it up as you want. What's a bit limiting is the animation selection. There's only 4 of them provided by Drop. QMK does allow for more animation options, so maybe there's a way to make it work. But if I recall correctly, Drop uses a slightly custom QMK implementation, so maybe that's not possible in the end. In all cases, I personally prefer static colors, so I'm quite pleased with what's possible here. So in conclusion, I'm a big fan of this keyboard. I love the case, the PCB is great too with both top and underglow lighting, and the level of customizability is very good. The dual USB-C port feature is also unique to drop keyboards, I believe, and that alone is pretty cool. As for the copper plate, it was a pleasant surprise and its finish is great in my view. It feels super solid and definitely helps make those 3-pin switches sit tight. I believe the brass plate would have a similar effect, but the aluminum plate will likely feel a bit softer. I was also pretty stoked at how little it affected the LED's colors. As for the keycaps, they're great, although nothing out of the ordinary, but they're a solid option if you want something high quality that looks clean on a budget. And finally, as for the switches, I would not personally pay $85 for them. I thought they weren't much better than other cheaper tactile switches I already had, and they really need to be lubed to potentially live up to the hype. So yeah, not my personal choice, although many people seem to like them too, so I guess you do have to try them to know. So that wraps it up for today. I'll have affiliate links to all the parts I used in today's video down below, so feel free to check them out and help the channel at the same time. As always, make sure you like the video if you did, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, as I'll see you in a future video.